Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I'm here today to do a book haul and tell you about all the books that I brought into my library in the month of October. I love a book haul. I love sharing what I have purchased and brought into my library and getting recommendations based on that. I love seeing what other people have brought into their libraries when they do a book haul. I just love it. So this is an exciting one. As usual, lately, it is a mix of new books, upcoming books, backlist books, and all of that good stuff. I'm going to start with something that really doesn't count for the book haul because I already owned a copy. It's sort of a book upgrade, if you will. So let's get right into it. This was the copy of Death of a Salesman that I have had on my shelf. And this is a photo of George C. Scott performing in it. That was not the original production of it. And when I was at my local used bookstore today, actually, I saw a copy of Death of a Salesman. It says special illustrated edition, but what that means is it has photos inside. And I decided to get it because it's a nicer copy. So I'm probably going to be trading the paperback in because I should very easily be able to read this. And one of the things I really love about it is look at the end papers. This is the stage production of the original show on Broadway. And that's really fascinating. And the pictures are of the original cast and the subsequent revivals and productions of it. So there are all these fun pictures of the cast. So Lee Cobb originated the role on Broadway. So that's a fun book upgrade. I'm really happy about it. Like I said, it doesn't really count for the book haul since I had already owned a copy, but I thought I would just show off how pretty this is. And actually, I realized I forgot to grab something really easily fixed. So I already hauled an advanced reader's copy of The Wayfinder, but FSG and MCD were kind enough to send me a finished copy of the book. And I am in love with it. It's so pretty. You can see the way it shines because they have that foil on the illustration. The spine is really pretty. Look at the end papers. And I'm actually just going to quickly check if there's a map. There is. You know I love a book with a map. And the pièce de résistance. Look at the actual book underneath the dust jacket. That is just absolutely gorgeous. So this also doesn't count for the actual book haul. I just wanted to show off how pretty this finished version of The Wayfinder by Adam Johnson, who is in the Pulitzer family of authors, is. All right, let's get to the books that count for the book haul. I'm going to start with things that were gifted or sent to me, things that I didn't spend money on, but which are really exciting. The first one is Stephen Rowley's The Dogs of Venice. I have actually already read this book, and it was sent to me by Putnam, who is always very kind. And I'm a huge fan of Stephen Rowley because of The Guncle, and have been reading his books ever since. This is a cute, tiny little story. It would be a great stocking stuffer about a man who has been married and has been planning a trip to Venice, but his husband announces that he wants a divorce, and he decides that he is going to go on the trip to Venice by himself, and he is trying to figure out how to be a more confident person, how to inhabit the world, and he notices this dog who is confident, who inhabits the world, and he sort of becomes obsessed with it. It's a cute, tiny story. Again, it would be a great stocking stuffer for anyone who is a bookish person or into The Guncle. So I've already read it, and it's adorable. Just very, very cute. The next one was sent to me by the New York Review of Books. It is Jack the Modernist by Robert Gluck. This is actually a new edition of an older book. Let me see if I can figure out when it was originally published. It's copyright 1985, and then they have now re-released it this year. And, very interesting cover on this book. I kind of like it, gotta say. Here is what this is about if you're unfamiliar. A classic of postmodern fiction, Robert Gluck's Jack the Modernist portrays the slow disintegration of a love affair set in the early 1980s. Bob is excited and lonely. He meets and pursues the elusive Jack, a director who transforms others without altering himself. Bob goes to the baths, gossips on the phone, goes to a bar, thinks about werewolves, has an orgasm, and discovers a number of truths about Jack. Out of print for decades, Gluck's Paean to Desire and Obsession explores the everyday in an idiom both intimate and lush. Sensual as well as sensational, Jack the Modernist is a heartfelt lover's discourse unlike any other. If you know me, you know I love a forgotten queer classic or a nearly forgotten queer classic, and that really made this book sound absolutely fascinating to me. So I reached out to them and they were kind enough to send me this finished edition of the book. I have heard from some people that the postmodern aspect left them a little bit cold, but I look forward to trying this book for myself. You know, it occurs to me, I didn't do what I usually do in my book hauls with the Dogs of Venice. I usually read a little bit from the opening, and I just didn't do that for this book. I apologize. So here's the opening of the Dogs of Venice. It was a trip Paul and Darren had planned together. Venice at Christmas, an idea cooked up while dining at Alice, a dark and moody Italian joint in New York's Greenwich Village. And let's stop there. And here's the opening for Jack the Modernist. Here we go. There's the introduction. And here is the opening of the book. Excited. You're not a lover till you blab about it. From earliest memory, I've been excited and lonely, like a membrane that needs a caress during lovemaking. One caress and then another. I met Jack at a forum in April 1981. We exchanged eyes during the presentation while his arm draped around the back of the empty chair next to him as though it were a boyfriend. That's the opening of Jack the Modernist by Robert Gluck. So excited to read that one. And a new arrival as of this week. I am hard at work, I'm not really hard at work. I am sort of trying to keep up with new releases, and we're at the point where a lot of new releases are coming out next year. So remember, this is Where the Serpent Lives by Daniel Muinadine. I should have looked up how to pronounce that before I finished this. I apologize. And if I didn't do this justice, please let me know. I probably didn't. So I apologize. Next time I talk about it, I will have looked up how to pronounce that properly. He is a Pulitzer Prize finalist for a story collection called In Other Rooms, Other Wonder. Or am I getting confused with the... No, it is In Other Rooms, Other Wonders. I thought I was getting confused with Truman Capote. But anyway, that is what it was. So this is coming out in January, and specifically January 13th, 2026, and I'm really excited about it. I reached out to Knopf, and they were kind enough to send me this copy, so now I can tell you, mark your calendars for January, because this book sounds really fascinating. Moving from Pakistan's glittering cities to its lawless feudal countryside, This Is Where the Serpent Lives powerfully evokes contemporary feudal Pakistan on a farm on which the destinies of a dozen unforgettable characters are linked through violence and love, resilience and tragedy. Orphaned as a little boy and fending for himself in the city streets, Yazid rises to a place of responsibility and respect in the Lahore household of Colonel Attar, a powerful industrialist and politician, only to find that position threatened by conflicting loyalties and misplaced trust. Born on Colonel Attar's country estate to a simple gardener, Saqib is entrusted with the management of a pioneering business, but he overreaches and finds himself an outlaw, confronting the violence of the corrupt Punjab police. The colonel's son competes with his cherished brother for the love of a woman and discovers that her choice colors his life with unexpected darkness as well as light. In matters of both power and money and the heart, these characters struggle to choose between paths that are moral and just and more worldly choices that allow them to survive in systems of caste, capital, and social power that so tightly grip their culture. Intimate and epic, elegiac, and profoundly moving, This Is Where the Serpent Lives is a tour de force destined to become a classic of contemporary literature. It received a starred review from Kirkus as well, and they had a great line about how it talks about how if you are on one side, basically the systems of having and having not can breed complacency or displeasure, something like that. And that is another thing that just sounded, I had already requested the book by the time I saw that review, but it really made me like, ooh, I want to read that. So This Is Where the Serpent Lives. And here is how it begins. Oh, it has a list of principal characters. All right. The first part is called The Golden Boy, Rawalpindi, Pakistan, 1955, 1970, and 1979. Bayezid never knew how he came to be a little boy alone in the streets of Rawalpindi. He had a memory more of forces than of people, a crowd, a hand no more. Yet the bazaars in those early 1950s were not so crowded as that, and Rawalpindi, a town small enough that a lost little boy should be found. Let's stop there. That's the opening of This Is Where the Serpent Lives. Mark your calendars, January 13th. So excited for that. And this one was sent by Tin House. It is The Salvage by Anbara Salam, which Tin House does a great job with covers. This even has like a very October feel to it. You got the black and the orange and the big skull on it. So it feels very appropriate for Halloween. Here's what it's about. It is 1962, and Marta Khoury, a trailblazing marine archaeologist, has been called to Cairnrock, a small island off the east coast of Scotland. A Victorian shipwreck dragged from the Arctic waters holds the remains of a celebrated explorer and the treasures of his final expedition. But on her first dive down to the ship, Marta becomes convinced she has seen a dark figure lurking amid the wreckage. When the Cuban Missile Crisis and the deep chill of a record-breaking winter keeps Marta stranded on Cairnrock, she forms a relationship with Elsie, a local woman working in the island's only hotel. When the ship's artifacts inexplicably disappear, Marta and Elsie have to brave freezing conditions to search for the missing objects before anyone else catches on. As something eerie seems to follow her at every step, Marta must confront if the haunting is a figment of her imagination, the repercussions of a terrible mistake from her past, or if something more sinister is at play that will trap her and everyone on the island and their secrets in an icy wilderness. Sounds interesting, right? So I did a video about this on Instagram when it first came, and I know Armor Cats managed to secure a copy of it as well. I don't know if they have managed to read it yet. If you have, please let me know in the comment section, because I haven't managed to read it, and there are other books in here that I would prioritize first, but it does sound really interesting, and I think I said Tin House. Okay, so Tin House was purchased by Zando recently. So I just looked at the spine and I saw Zando, but that's the Tin House logo above it. So that caused me a little bit of confusion. Here is how the book begins. 1. Saturday, October 20th, 1962. When I arrive at Port Mary Harbor, there are already men in the fishing boats. Their oilskin aprons creak as they winch in ropes and haul rusted cages, seawater rolling down their arms. Nudging one another, they fall silent as I walk along the pier. And that's the beginning of The Salvage by Anbara Salam, out now. All right, and then 2 books that were gifted to me by subscribers, specifically LuvSumBooks and Jordan Seifert 4640. They went onto my bookshop.org wish list, and LuvSumBooks sent me The Theory of Light and Matter by Andrew Porter. If you follow along, you know I read Andrew Porter's newest book, which is called The Imagined Life, and absolutely loved it. It's one of my favorite reads of the year, and I have wanted to read more books by him, so I'm so happy to have this story collection. And I've been thinking, I really want to get back into story collections, so I might have a project for myself next year. We'll talk about that when we get closer to the new year. So, these 10 stories take us across the country, from rural Pennsylvania to Southern California to suburban Connecticut, and deep into characters struggling to find meaning in their day-to-day lives. The Theory of Light and Matter is a stunningly astute vision of contemporary American suburbia, full of tension, heartbreak, and emotional complexity, the work of an important new voice. This was published by Vintage. It's a tiny little thing. I am really hoping to read this soon, so hopefully very soon. And thank you to LuvSumBooks for this again, because I am delighted. The first short story in this collection is called Hole. The hole was at the edge of Tal Walker's driveway. It's paved over now, but 12 summers ago, Tal climbed into it and never came up again. Weeks afterward, my mother would hug me for no reason, pulling me tight against her each time I left the house. And later, at night, before I went to bed, she'd run her fingers through the bristles of my crew cut and lean close to me, whispering my name. That is the opening of the first story in The Theory of Light and Matter by Andrew Porter. I very much believe that I will be reading that very soon. Now, Jordan Seifert, 4640, sent me A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr, which is a book that I have wanted for a really long time and just haven't gotten for myself. So thank you to Jordan for making this happen. And actually, I am reading this book right now. I am just about halfway through it, and it's delightful so far. Here's the description of it. This edition is published by New York Review of Books, by the way. In J.L. Carr's deeply charged poetic novel, Tom Birkin, a veteran of the Great War and a broken marriage, arrives in the remote Yorkshire village of Oxgodby to restore a recently discovered medieval mural in the local church. Living in the bell tower, surrounded by the resplendent countryside of high summer, and laboring each day to uncover an anonymous painter's extraordinary depiction of the apocalypse, Birkin finds that he himself has been restored to a new and hopeful attachment to life. But summer ends, and with the work done, Birkin must leave. Now, long after, as he reflects on the passage of time and the power of art, he finds in his memories some consolation for all that has been lost. And the first half of this book has been very beautiful and restrained in a very elegant way, and I'm really enjoying this. Here is how it opens. Oh, that's the introduction. We're going to skip over that and get to the beginning. A month in the country. When the train stopped, I stumbled out, nudging and kicking the kit bag before me. Back down the platform, someone was calling despairingly, "Oxgodby, Oxgodby." No one offered a hand, so I climbed back into the compartment, stumbling over ankles and feet to get at the fish bass on the rack and my folding camp bed under the seat. If this was a fair sample of Northerners, then this was enemy country, so I wasn't too careful where I put my boots. I heard one chap draw in his breath and another grunt. Neither spoke. This book has been a delight so far, and I'm so glad to have it. Again, thank you to Jordan Seifert, 4640, for making that happen for me. All right. From here on in, we are talking about books that I purchased for myself, and yeah, I acted like I wanted to say something else about that, but that's it. That's the headline. From here out, these are books that I purchased for myself. If you follow along, you may remember that I have been a fan of Abdi Nazemian recently. Like a Love Story, wonderful. Only This Beautiful Moment, which is faced out on my shelf right there. If you can see, I realized you can't see my hand. It's there. Is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book that he wrote. And Like a Love Story, also great. I did DNF the book that he published last year, Desert Echoes, but because of the quality of the other two, I'm willing to try again. This is Exquisite Things. It's published by Harper, and Joel has already read this, and a subscriber named Kurt Anderson has also read this and indicated that it is definitely a step up. So I'm looking forward to this. Now, we pre-ordered this book from a local independent bookstore in California, I guess close to where Abdi Nazemian lives, because he did a pre-order campaign with them where if you had pre-ordered it, he would sign the book for you. Now, when I filled out the form, I did say Greg and Joel, but in the end, the book that came is only addressed to me. So I felt bad about that. Joel said he doesn't care. But it says, "To Gregory, stay exquisite, Abdi Nazemian." And he drew a little picture, which is just fun and delightful and really, I absolutely love that. So I'm glad we did the pre-order campaign to get the signed copy of it and support an independent bookstore. Here's what this is about. Shahryar believes he was born in the wrong time. All he's ever wanted is to love and be loved, but 1890s London doesn't offer him the freedom to be his true self. And Oscar Wilde's trial for gross indecency has only reaffirmed that. But one night, and one writer, will grant Shahryar what he's always wished for, the opportunity to live in a time and place where he can love freely. Rechristened as Shams and then as Brahm, he finds what feels like eternal happiness. But can anything truly be eternal? Oliver doesn't feel that 1920s Boston gives him a lot of options to be his full self. He knows he could only ever love another boy, but that would break his beloved mother's heart. Oliver finds freedom and acceptance in the secret queer community his cousin introduces him to at Harvard, and when he meets a mysterious boy with eyes as warm as flame, he too becomes forever young. Spanning 130 years of love and longing, this tale of immortal beloveds searching for their perfect place and time is a vibrant hymn to the beauty of being alive, a celebration of queer love and community, and a reminder that behind every tragic thing that ever existed, there is something exquisite. From Joel and from Kurt, it sounds like this really leans in the direction of The Picture of Dorian Gray, so the Oscar Wilde connection is probably intentional, and I look forward to catching up to this book. Here is how it opens. Bram, London, April 2025. I walk through the lobby of Claridge's. Curious eyes take in my look. Baggy cotton pants, a denim blazer with graffiti on the back. Security cameras track me from ceiling corners. Perhaps I'll be found despite the veil I use to hide my face. I've led a life of risk. Will this be my final gamble? Coming back to London? Sleeping in the very suite where my father set my life on its unique course. Preparing to walk the same streets where I once knew happiness. Some risks must be taken, no matter how dangerous. That's the opening of Exquisite Things by Abdi Nazemian. Very much looking forward to catching up to that. All right. Also, if you follow along, you may know that I have a book obsession. Of course, that's what we're here for. I am also pretty obsessed with the Academy Awards. And I recently watched the movie The Divorcee, and this specifically was something that I sought out because Norma Shearer won Best Actress for it. She won the 3rd ever Best Actress prize for The Divorcee, and she was really good in it. And as I was looking into it and reading the trivia, I realized it was based on a novel that was very popular at the time, but has sort of faded into obscurity. And then I saw that just recently, McNally Editions published a brand new edition of Ex-Wife by Ursula Parrott. So this is the book that The Divorcee was based on. And it was a publishing phenomenon at the time it was published. And it was very scandalous for the time. And what a gorgeous cover. I hope you can see it. It's just very striking. So I have quietly been hoping for this, and bookshop.org did a thing where you could get free shipping. So Joel ordered a cookbook and I ordered this. So thank you to bookshop.org for making this possible. So I think I might be really getting into New York Review of Books and McNally editions, because the next book that I have to talk about is also a McNally edition and also gorgeous. I'm also a big fan of French flaps on a paperback. Look at this fun red coloring on the inside. So this is just absolutely delightful for me. Here is what it's about. It's 1924, and Peter and Patricia have what looks to be a very modern marriage. Both drink, both smoke, both work. Patricia is a head copywriter at a major department store. When it comes to sex with other people, both believe in the honesty policy. Until they don't. Or at least until Peter doesn't. And a shell-shocked, lovesick Patricia finds herself starting out all over again, but this time around as a different kind of single woman. The ex-wife. An instant bestseller when it was published anonymously in 1929, Ex-Wife captures the speakeasies, nightclubs, and parties that defined jazz-age New York, alongside the morning after aspirin and calisthenics, the lunch hour visits to the gym, the girl talk, and the freedoms and anguish of solitude. It also casts a cool eye on the bedrooms and the doctor's offices where, despite rising hemlines, the men still call the shots. The result is a unique view of what its author Ursula Parrott called the era of the one-night stand. Scandalous. Ursula Parrott also had a very interesting life. We don't have to get into that now. It, I believe, is outlined in the introduction or the foreword to this book, which begins, I'd never heard of Ursula Parrott when McNally Editions introduced me to Ex-Wife, the author's 1929 novel about a young woman who suddenly finds herself suspended in the collisionist space between matrimony and divorce. But she eventually, despite wild success with this book and some others at the time, she ended up bankrupt, essentially, and just a very interesting life. We don't need to get into it now, but I feel like this is another book that I am hoping to read very, 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 very soon. So we're going to skip over the foreword. Here is how the book itself begins. My husband left me 4 years ago. Why, I don't precisely understand, and never did. Nor, I suspect, does he. Nowadays, when the catastrophe that it seemed to be and its causes are matters equally inconsequential, I am increasingly disposed to the belief that he brought himself to the point of deserting me because I made such outrageous scenes at first mention of the possibility. That is the opening of Ex-Wife by Ursula Parrott. The the other McNally edition that I have, now I heard about this on Instagram, actually, and we recently took a trip to the Country Bookshelf in Bozeman, and while we were in there, I had sort of resigned myself that I was unlikely to run into The Pilgrimage by John Broderick in a bookstore, but the Country Bookshelf is probably the largest independent bookstore in Montana, and they had it. So I was like, I'm getting that. And I did. And again, I might be getting obsessed with McNally editions because look at how cool and just gorgeous and striking this is. By the way, there's a foreword by Colm Tabine. I'm into that. And again, with the French flaps and the sort of red-orange inside, here is what this book is about. A prosperous businessman, once the envy of his neighbors, Michael Glynn lies crippled with arthritis. In hope of a miracle, the family priest urges Michael and his young wife Julia to make a pilgrimage to Lourdes, along with Michael's devoted nephew and physician Jim. Yet the Glynns' holiday is thrown into disarray when anonymous letters begin to arrive, full of terrible, obscene accusations. Banned in Ireland on its first publication in 1961, Broderick's debut landed, quote, like an incendiary device, end quote, anticipating the seismic shifts that would soon turn the country's theocratic society upside down. It is a darkly comic, blasphemous, and sexually charged chamber drama laying bare the hypocrisies of a small Irish town, quote, as watchful as the jungle, end quote, and teetering on the brink of catastrophe. In the words of Colm Tabine, in his foreword to this edition, the pilgrimage, quote, cleared a space in the jungle so that its wildness could be more easily seen, end quote. I am so into all of that. This is another book I'd really love to read very soon. Here is how it begins, if I can get past the foreword and get to the actual book. Okay, here we go. I promise I'm here now. Stephen paused outside the door to listen. The voices beyond were muffled, but quite audible. Mr. Glynn's voice, which had since his illness become very deep and throaty, was nevertheless easier to hear. That was because his bed faced the door. The others, Dr. Glynn, Mrs. Glynn, and Father Victor, would, as usual, be sitting on chairs placed about the bed with their backs to the door. They were talking about Lourdes. That is the beginning of The Pilgrimage by John Broderick, a book that scandalized Ireland when it was originally published, and I am very much looking forward to reading that book. I mean, you can take it for granted that I'm really interested in reading all of these books, but I particularly want to read that one soon. So, if you're watching this, you are probably a bookish person, and therefore you are probably familiar with Olive Editions. So every year, Olive Editions, which is part of Harper Perennial, will put out limited edition copies of books that all have these little black lines running across. And I have always been a bit enamored of them, but I have never actually gotten any for myself. This year, their theme was banned books, which immediately made me really interested, and I decided to get two of them when I was at a bookstore near where I live in Hamilton, Montana, which is called Chapter One. Great store. I absolutely love Chapter One. And since they had both of these, I decided to grab them. They did also have The Magician's Assistant by Ann Patchett, but I've been collecting her books in hardcover, so I decided to hold out for that. So anyway, the ones that I got were The Grass is Singing by Doris Lessing, because I have never read a Doris Lessing, and this feels particularly visually striking. I also got 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, because I love this book, but somehow I didn't own a copy. So now I do. And I can't wait to experience Doris Lessing. Both of these authors, by the way, are Nobel laureates, and that makes it kind of fun. So I finally own Olive Editions, and I don't think it actually says, okay, here we go. The Grass is Singing, Doris Lessing's first novel, now celebrating its 75th anniversary, is at once a riveting chronicle of human disintegration, a searing portrait of the brutality of colonialism, and a brilliant depiction of the quiet horror of one woman's struggle against a ruthless fate. We'll stop there, and I'll read the opening bit of the book. Here we go. Chapter 1, Murder Mystery by Special Correspondent. Mary Turner, wife of Richard Turner, a farmer at Ngesi, was found murdered on the front veranda of their homestead yesterday morning. The houseboy, who has been arrested, has confessed to the crime. No motive has been discovered. It is thought he was in search of valuables. That's the opening of The Grass is Singing by Doris Lessing. The Grass is Singing. I can speak. You probably know what 100 Years of Solitude is about. It's a generation-spanning epic about the Buendia family. It is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book. And to me, it has one of the best openings in literature. Here we go. Many years later, as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Aureliano Buendia was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. I love that opening sentence. 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. All right. I have another pile of books here. This is another one that I got yesterday. So I've added some books to this yesterday and today as I'm filming this. I was at the library picking something up and I perused their used books and saw Last Orders by Graham Swift, winner of the Booker Prize. And I picked it up because I've heard of it, but have actually didn't even really know what it was about. And I read the back and thought, ooh, I'm in. And plus, because it was a library sale, this was $1. You really can't argue with that. 4 men, friends, most of them, for half a lifetime, gather in a London pub. They have taken it upon themselves to carry out the last orders of Jack Dodds, master butcher, and deliver his ashes to the sea. As they drive towards the fulfillment of their mission, their errand becomes an extraordinary journey into their collective and individual pasts. I am sold. This edition was published by Vintage, and I don't know when I will get around to reading this, but I am feeling pretty excited. If you have read this, and I feel like it's very likely that a lot of people watching this will have read it, let me know what you thought of it in the comment section down below. The first chapter is called Bermondsey. It ain't like your regular sort of day. Bernie pulls me a pint and puts it in front of me. He looks at me, puzzled, with his loose, doggy face, but he can tell I don't want no chit-chat. That's why I'm here, 5 minutes after opening, for a little silent powwow with a pint glass. He can see the black tie, though it's 4 days since the funeral. I hand him a $5 and he takes it to the till and brings back my change. He puts the coins extra gently, eyeing me, on the bar beside my pint. Last Orders by Graham Swift. I have very much resisted the idea of reading James Joyce because he's sort of legendary for writing dense, complicated, stream of conscious books. A lot of people have told me that Dubliners is a more accessible way to try him. So I saw this beautiful edition of it at my local used bookstore and thought, all right, why not? I don't know when I will get around to this, but it just seemed like something that I would like to have in my library and eventually get around to. So, because these are short stories. Dubliners by James Joyce is a collection of 15 short stories that delve into the lives of ordinary Dublin residents at the turn of the 20th century. Each story captures moments of epiphany, portraying themes of paralysis, disillusionment, and the human condition. Known for its realism and innovative narrative style, Dubliners is a cornerstone of modernist literature, offering a profound exploration of Irish identity, culture, and the struggles of everyday life. This edition is published by Page, so I figure at some point I will give it a shot. The first story is called The Sisters. There was no hope for him this time. It was the third stroke. Night after night I had passed the house. It was vacation time, and studied the lighted square of window. And night after night I had found it lighted in the same way, fairly and evenly. That's the opening of the first story in Dubliners by James Joyce. Just today, I was in my local used bookstore, as I have mentioned, and I saw this $1.98 copy of One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. I'm at that point in the video where I'm losing my ability to talk. Bear with me, please. One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, another Nobel laureate, actually. And I was considering it. One thing I love to do, because I love vintage editions of books, but sometimes they feel like they're falling apart. And this one doesn't. It feels like I could read this. So I knew that my sister read this in her AP English class in high school. So I texted her and said, hey, do you remember if you liked this book? And she said, oh yeah, I loved it as much as you can love a book about a Russian gulag. And I said, okay, but if I found a copy for $2 at my local used bookstore, do you think it's worth adding to my library and seeing if I get to it. And she said, oh yeah, absolutely. I'd say just grab it. I liked it more than War and Peace. So strong recommendation from my sister, so I figured I would grab it and bring it here. So from the icy blast of reveille through the sweet release of sleep, Ivan Denisovich endures. A common carpenter, he is one of millions viciously imprisoned for countless years on baseless charges, sentenced to the waking nightmare of the Soviet work camps in Siberia. Even in the face of degrading hatred, where life is reduced to a bowl of gruel and a rare cigarette, hope and dignity prevail. This powerful novel of fact is a scathing indictment of communist tyranny and an eloquent affirmation of the human spirit. So I don't have immediate plans, but hopefully having it in my library will inspire me to pick it up at some point. All right, we're going to skip past the opening, introduction, explanatory notes, forward. Okay, here we go. Reveille was sounded, as always, at 5 a.m., a hammer pounding on a rail outside camp headquarters. The ringing noise came faintly on and off through the window panes covered with ice more than an inch thick and died away fast. It was cold, and the warder didn't feel like going on banging. One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. All right. Also, today, when I was at that local used bookstore, I saw this beautiful vintage hardcover edition of The Thornbirds by Colleen McCullough. Now, last month, when I did my book haul, I talked about how I never got to meet my mother-in-law because she was gone long before I met Joel. But I do try to get to know her through him. And recently we were talking and he mentioned that she loved Watership Down and The Thornbirds. I decided to go with Watership Down and got myself a copy of that. But when I saw this, I thought, okay, well, I have to get this now, in honor of my mother-in-law, who I have never met. And I have heard good things about this book, so it's not altogether wild that I would buy a copy of it. I'm going to guess that you probably know, and since we're running long on time, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is something that I would like to read at some point, specifically as a way of getting to know my mother-in-law and books that she read and liked. So that's the idea here. I'm going to try not to make an unwieldy pile below me. And then the final book that I got today was Exhalation, Stories by Ted Chiang. This is not a typical book for me, but while I was in the store, I ran into my neighbor and his daughter, who is visiting from Vermont. They are both big readers of science fiction and fantasy, and that is a genre I struggle with. And I think it's because I read a lot of bad science fiction and fantasy when I was a teenager, and I just developed this aversion to it over time. So I was talking to them, and his daughter mentioned Ted Chiang, and we started talking about it. And I mentioned my issue with sci-fi and fantasy, and she very strongly recommended this one. And when she was telling me about it, it sounded like something I could get into. And I do think it's important to read outside your comfort zone, so I need to do a little bit better about sci-fi and fantasy. And this sounds like a good way of getting me into it. And again, it's short stories, and I'm hoping to do something with short stories next year. I'm thinking on the details of that. These are 9 stunningly original, provocative, and poignant stories, 2 published for the very first time, all from the mind of the incomparable Ted Chiang. Tackling some of humanity's oldest questions, along with new quandaries only he could imagine, these stories will change the way you think, feel, and see the world. Bold words, but according to my neighbor's daughter, who is a very intelligent, well-read woman, as well as my neighbor, sounds like something I could get into. The first story is The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate. O mighty Caliph and commander of the faithful, I am humbled to be in the splendor of your presence. A man can hope for no greater blessing as long as he lives. Because we're short on time, I'm going to leave it there for this one. But I look forward to reading outside my comfort zone with that one. We have 5 books left. I'm going to go very quickly. I Am by Maggie O'Farrell. I loved Hamnet. I was iffy on The Marriage Portrait. But one book from her backlist that pretty much everyone says they have loved is I Am, which is a memoir told through stories about times where Maggie O'Farrell almost died, which is a very fascinating way of framing a memoir. The subtitle is 17 Brushes with Death. And I've heard so many good things about it, so I'm very excited to finally have a copy of this book for myself. Here is how it begins. Chapter 1, Neck, 1990, with a fun little illustration. And here it is. On the path ahead, stepping out from behind a boulder, a man appears. We are, he and I, on the far side of a dark tarn that lies hidden in the bowl-curved summit of this mountain. The sky is a milky blue above us. No vegetation grows this far up, so it is just me and him, the stones and the still black water. He straddles the narrow track with both booted feet, and he smiles. That's the opening of I Am by Maggie O'Farrell, and I'm so looking forward to the film adaptation of Hamnet soon. We were in a bookstore in Missoula dedicated to romance novels called FMC, female main character, which is in downtown Missoula, and the owner's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful person, very fun to go in there and chat with. So while we were in there, I was browsing and I saw Henry by Alan Bratton. This is a book I've heard good things about, and it was edited by Brandon Taylor, the author of Real Life. And I've sort of been thinking about reading it. So I saw it in the store and I just thought, why not? Support the bookstore, get something that sounds interesting. And this is, it sounds sort of like a modern gay play on Henry the Fourth or Henry the Fifth. I don't remember now. It's Henry the Fourth Part 1, because it's London 2014 and Hal Lancaster, son and heir of Henry, Duke of Lancaster, is in a holding pattern. So it's sort of like a spin on that. And that sounds fascinating. And like I said, I've heard a lot of really good things about it. I don't mean to give this book short shrift, but we're running a bit long. Part 1 is Laugh Now, Cry Later. At Jack's flat, he let you smoke indoors. Hal went out for a fag anyway and saw that the sun had risen. There was warm spring light on him. He walked up the road against a perpetual flow of small children in embroidered jumpers and rounded collars and got on a bus that would take him northwest across the Thames. Henry by Alan Bratton. And of course, remember that the word that sounds like a slur means cigarette in that language. I struggled with whether or not to say it. All right. A lot of people talk about Anita Brookner, and I've never read one of her books. They had Hotel du Lac at my local used bookstore, the Book Exchange, and I believe this is the book that won her the Booker Prize. So I figured, all right, I'm going to get this book. I'll have it in my library, and at some point, I'm going to read it and see what all the fuss is about. This is the book that won her the Booker Prize and established her international reputation. It tells the story of Edith Hope, who writes romance novels under a pseudonym. When her life begins to resemble the plots of her own novels, however, Edith flees to Switzerland, where the quiet luxury of the Hotel du Lac promises to restore her to her senses. Here is a quick look at how it opens. From the window, all that could be seen was a receding area of gray. It was supposed that beyond the gray garden, which seemed to sprout nothing but the stiffish leaves of some unfamiliar plant, lay the vast gray lake, spreading like an anesthetic towards the invisible further shore. And beyond that, in imagination only, yet verified by the brochure, the peak of the Dent d'Oche, on which snow might already be slightly and silently falling. It's the opening of Hotel du Lac by Anita Brookner. All right, 2 more. And this one's going to be very quick because I finally got myself a copy of Four Squares by Bobby Finger. This is one of my favorite reads of the year. I listened to it on audio back in May or June. I think it was June, actually. And it was included in both my and Joel's favorite reads of the year so far. I'll link that video down below. And I am so excited. So this is about Artie Anderson. And on we start with his 30th birthday? Yes, in 1992 on his 30th birthday. And then we alternate with him 30 years later on his birthday. So we have his 30th birthday and his 60th birthday. And it's about the 2 different timelines because in the first one, he meets a man that he ends up in a relationship with. And it's clear, you sort of wonder how he gets to the point where he is in the more present day storyline. And it's really fascinating. And this is such a beautiful elegiac book about the people you meet, the world you inhabit, and remembering the people you have lost. And I thought it was absolutely beautiful. So I'm so happy that I finally have a copy of this now. And we're going to leave it at that. And I'm only really going to mention that I'm rebuilding my play collection. And one thing I'm doing is sort of paying attention to plays that have won the Tony Award for Best Play or the Pulitzer Prize for Best Play. And I saw JB by Archibald MacLeish at my local used bookstore. And it's a really beautiful edition. And I can't help but run my fingers over it because it has that sort of cloth feeling cover that they did for a time back in the day. And I decided to get it for my play collection. So this play was originally published in 1956. This edition is from 1958. And I'm happy to have it. So we'll leave it at that, but especially since there's no description about what this is about on the back. So those are the books that I brought into my library in the month of October. If you have thoughts about any of these books or ideas about which ones I should prioritize, let me know in the comment section down below. If you have recommendations based on my interest in any of these books, let me know that as well. And I'm going to leave it there and just thank you for your time. I always appreciate that. I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.